Okay.
Basic idea.
Okay. It's in the meeting invite.
The IBM Smart Cloud, doesn't it ask you to dial in? When you connect?
Yeah, but also put the meeting invite, put the numbers to dial in into the meeting invite itself.
But not everybody has a meeting invite.
Yeah, we'll have to post that out there on the channel. We do.
I posted the connection, and when you go in there, it'll prompt you to dial in on it.
Not sure.
Okay, we can type so I can read. The number is in the U.S. 646-307-13.
Hey, it's Chris.
This code is 891688003.
That's not the AT&T.
That's not AT&T.
All right, here's the next chart. Again, this is a recap of what we did earlier in the year. Do you want to talk about this one, Matt?
Only if you want me to. I mean,
Yep.
Okay.
Hit a little high spot.
Yeah, so the basic idea is we wanted to get more of the functions and integration testing pulled back from the system test team towards development. So we are going to rely heavily on unit tests for coverage, and we want to build up from there into integration tests that are written using a BDD style, not necessarily the same frameworks that everybody's used to, but a style. We go off and describe the context about what's going on and the behavior around that. And we want those to be there for the component level integration or the function test stuff and higher up in the end-to-ends. That was the idea. And we want to let the system test team focus mostly on things that we expect to happen around, like I said, the operational concerns, things like longevity, deployment, manageability, stress testing, that sort of stuff that basically boils down to whether or not we can operationalize our fabric and ancillary projects in a real running environment offered as a service, et cetera.
Okay. Okay. All right, so in this chart, if we take inventory of where we are based on that strategy, we've done a lot of good progress. We've plowed ahead, straight ahead, but now we're going to have to realize we can't swallow that whole thing all at once. It's going to be a journey. We're going to work over, we're going to continue to execute on that strategy. But as we move to the quarterly releases, right, we have it targeted the end of June, into September, into December. We're going to have to phase this in. So we realize right now the integration test is not well structured right now for the 1-2 time frame. So we sit back and ask ourselves, okay, what are we going to do, right? We're making progress on the journey, but we can't get this piece done for 1-2. So what are we going to do? So what we decided to do is, we met with a subset of the maintainers, and we want to propose this as the way we're going to approach the 1-2. We want to expand the unit test coverage and expand the end-to-end coverage to kind of cover that gap. So we're going to move the unit test to the right some, do more coverage for end-to-end, more than we normally do, and then end-to-end tests we're going to move to the left. So this is a visual kind of overlay of what we want to do for 1-2. So you'll see the big red circle through it. And we know we're not well set up for that. So in a perfect world, we'd be executing on the strategy. If you look at the rows going across, and we label them strategy on the left-hand side, in an ideal world, we'd execute on that. But in the absence of that, for 1-2, just for 1-2, until we get further down this journey, we want to expand our tests, our unit tests to the right, and then our end-to-end test to the left. If you look at the bottom boxes there with the arrows going right and left.
The reality is that we, today in the code base, we have a lot of tests that really aren't just unit tests. They do kind of make their way into the integration layer. So I think what Clayton's trying to say is we're probably going to continue to do that for 1.2. What I would ask, is just an ask for me, is if you do realize that you're writing integration tests using this file, it would be great if you could segregate them at least into a separate file or build tag, something that you can use to basically say, hey, we know this is integration.
before we jump into the end-to-end chart, so we're going to pause here. Is there any questions on this strategy, the overall strategy in general, and the kind of what I call a phased approach from 1 to 2, based on what you see here on the charts?
It's very hard to hear what Matt says. Can you speak a bit louder?
Unfortunately, we don't have good technology in here. We're using a cell phone, so I'll try again. Which part didn't we hear? All right, I'll try to repeat the last slide worth of discussion. So what I said was, I don't believe that what our phased approach looks like right now is too much different from what's been happening historically. There are a number of tests in the Fabric code base today that kind of go into the integration environment, shall we say. They are not really strictly unit tests. So I think we're going to continue to do that for this release, have some of those things that, while they're not ideal to have them in that structured that way as unit tests, they're really integration tests, we'll keep them that way. My ask, and this is not a requirement, it's an ask, is if you realize that you are writing an integration test, it would be really nice if we can at least segregate the integration tests into a separate file so that we know that, or at least tag them in some way so that we can observe what's unit and what's integration. Again, ideally they're separate files so that when we go off and run them, we know that. But whatever you can do there to help identify or segregate the two would be appreciated.
So if there's no more questions on the chart here on the phased approach, we'll move on. One last chance here. Okay, so at this point, there's been a lot of good work done by Letitia and other people along with Matt on the end-to-end tool, and she's going to demonstrate the tool, and then not only how to demonstrate it, how to plug into the tool as well. So we need to plug your test into the tool for the coverage. You'll know how to do that at the end of this call. So I'll turn over to you, Letitia.
Alrighty, so to get things started here, as you guys, let's talk about the. Right, so the end-to-end test, if you guys want to know more, I've included the link here to actually take a look and start going over some of it's a basic tutorial, that link there, so you can get a good idea of what GINCO does. As Matt stated earlier, it's a BDD-like package to allow us to perform more of our integration tests. What we've done for the end-to-end test at this state does not include SDK, Fabric CA, TLS, event service, things of that sort. Right now, what's out, the CRs that are out are pretty much solo-based. I do have Kafka and Zookeeper coming soon. But just a heads up that this is at a very basic end-to-end to kind of get things started. So the basic structure of what we're looking at, this is the integration directory. As you can see, there are three basic, we split them up into three basic categories. You see end-to-end, runner, and the world. The runner comprises of different components. So you'll see we have the config TX, couch, cryptogen, order, things of that sort. Just the different components and how we can break them down and how we can run them, and the different components of how we can build our network, how we can actually utilize these different pieces. The world contains config information, config information as well as different things that are going to be across the components, such as your build environment and things of that sort. And the end-to-end will actually contain a suite. Each of these guys, each of these directories have their own individual tests, so we can actually test the different components of those. So let's dive into the code. So it's just a quick overview. This is the end-to-end test, if you will. As you can see, we have a before each. So before each test run, there's a number of items that will be executed. Here, make this a little easier though. The world, if you will, comprises of a number of different aspects. It's everything that you'll need for your network as well as your deployment and just managing. It allows us to easily manage our test setup. So you can see it contains like a root path of where we're executing. This will pretty much be like a temporary directory where we can house all of our artifacts. The components that we're running, as I stated before, like such things as paths and things of that sort. Crypto, this is, well, you can see this up ahead here. Some of our config information and where those are housed as well. Deployment, just like normal, we have the chain code, the channel name, things of that sort. Once you all take a look at it, I'm going through this pretty fast. Once you take a look at the code, you can look at it in more detail. And, so on and so forth with the order orgs, tier orgs, and profiles. All of those are based on crypto, config TX, the config that we use to set up our networks in general. What I've done with Matt and SIA is we've looked at what was already in place based off of config TX gen, looked at the local config there, and kind of worked backwards to actually generate these config files to build up the network that we need. So that's in there before. To make this a little clearer, before is everything that's executed before your test run. After is what you do. So pretty much it's like the cleanup. Think of it as setup and tear down, if you will. So this is the after each, which includes a lot of our tear down, removing the different images and networks and things of that sort.
So just a couple highlights. Sorry, I don't mean to totally interrupt, but just a couple highlights on the befores and the afters. So one of the things, I think we kind of missed a couple pieces of introductory material. The first one is for the end-to-ends, we're trying to run the official binaries. Right? So we want to actually build the orderer, we want to actually build the peer, we want to get things working with the real stuff. So as part of the setup of the befores, we're actually going off and taking the code that's in the current repository and building the binaries for it. So as part of that, you're going to see that there's going to be a little bit of the-exec build that's happening. We're actually building the binaries we're going to run. In this environment, we're going to run those binaries on the host, and we're going to put our dependencies that we need inside of containers and use those containers for our dependencies. For example, Couch, we're running inside of a container, and we're accessing it using the network that we have for Docker. So I just want to give you an idea of like how this kind of works. So if you change a bit of code and you jump the integration test, it will rebuild things that are necessary for you and run the execution. You don't have to go through a whole packaging phase and everything else. I just wanted to say that.
All right, so just to kind of go over, like I said, the basic flow of our current, our basic end-to-end. As I stated earlier, this is using a solo-based order network with 2 orgs. And then you can see right here we have some of our assertions. Well, as Matt was saying, the Bootstrap network, let's see if I can make this here. Here's the bootstrapping of the network. What is inside the Bootstrap network? Let me open this up so you guys can see. So inside the Bootstrap network, we're actually generating the YAML files that we use to for CryptoGen as well as the config TX. And this is where you can actually see we're calling the runners themselves. And one of the setups, is, as Matt mentioned, is actually building the environment before we even get here. But we actually generate all of these files for each org and channel as well. Then we actually go in, and then we actually go through and perform the assertion after the fact. We then go through and we build our network. We have the different calls for doing that, the order network, the peer network. Now, how can we tell? That's all based off of here is W, that's our world. You can see the different aspects of world. This is Here's our system test channel that we've declared and our test channel that we've declared. The different MSPs for each of the different orders or the different organizations. We have our order MSP and our peer, both for each organization here. So you can kind of see how it's broken down, how it's organized, such that you can change your network as you see fit. Any questions about that before I move on to the next thing? I just want to make sure I pause.
I have a small question. I saw there are all kinds of host names that are local hosts, 127.0.0.1, etc. Are these hosts, the peers, for example, are they run, maybe I missed it, inside containers or as processes?
So the orders and the peers are not executed in containers. They're executed locally. Kafka, Zookeeper, Couch, those are inside Docker containers as well as the chain code, as it were. But because they are executed using containers, in order for the order to access them from, because it's running locally, we actually have to make sure that we map those guys accordingly. Does that answer your question?
So where does the standard output and error of the processes redirected to?
It goes to the writers that you set up on the config. So when you launch the process in the container, she'll probably show you we pass in right now Dako writers as the log streams, and those get written to test output. So you can see on the prefix what actually happens. When she runs it, you should see that there's a little prefix saying what is coming in. Looks a lot like that.
Okay. Any more questions? All right. So and keep in mind too. Yeah, here. Keep in mind that each of the overall config function calls can actually be executed. We can actually call them without calling the overall view. For example, if I want to build my network, but not necessarily call build network because I want to do something in between, I don't have to call build network. I can actually call W order network or W peer network in my actual test itself and fill in whatever I want to, work here. So I can do that, but in my test itself, I would actually call these items itself and not build network, just as a heads up side effect. All right, so setup channel does pretty much a basic idea. Won't go into a whole lot of detail here, but it's the creation of the channel, the fetching of the transaction files, the order blocks, joining of the channel, things of that sort for each of these guys, instantiation as well. So pretty much ends at instantiation. So once we see that everything is instantiated, we say, all right, we're good to go. We've already set up our channel. Then in this case, I just kind of verify that it was installed and instantiated. But at that point, we can start performing our queries and invokes however we want to proceed there. As Matt stated, let's go ahead and run. In the slides, actually, I stated that there are a couple of different ways that you can execute these tests, just using Gecko-R or -V if you want verbose mode. We can show that. And then you can actually run them in the same way as you run all the unit tests, now just typing in go test. So that's I guess I could have done -V. This will take a couple minutes. I'll just show you pretty much what the output looks like so you don't have to wait through the whole process. Here it is in a quick summary where you can actually see I have tests for my end-to-end. This is a quick summary of the end-to-end test suite. where you can actually see, pretty much how long it took and pass spell, things of that sort. Same thing with the runner. You can see how many there and how many other world. When there's a failure, it actually displays more verbose information, so you can actually see the failure and why it occurred, to kind of help you with a lot of the debugs. So you can actually follow through and see, well, this was actually in the order logs, here's the peer, and this was from the command that you pretty much executed at that point. And it just kind of goes all the way up. Kind of gives you some more information there. Let's see. So as you can see, it's running here. I'm trying to think. Test data. Didn't go into the test data. Test data, we actually have a couple of different areas. Let's go ahead and go into one so you can see. So the test data, okay. All right, so the test data, these are what we're pretty much using as far as, for the most part, the unit tests and so unit tests pretty much are runners and our setup for the end-to-end test. In the end-to-end test, we also have the different YAML files that we're using for each of the different peers as well as the orders. This is, once again, allowing us to perform our config. Without you having to, without us having to actually generate them. Ideally, we would actually have this, and we don't have this yet either. We would be generating these based off of our world config. That hasn't been done yet, but that's the ideal situation. We'll eventually get there. As you can see, these are just the config information for each of those different components. One thing I do want to point out that I think is really good that we started doing here is we have what we're calling golden files. The golden files are what we can use to test against, if you will, to say this is what we want to look for whenever we're actually executing it. A comparison, if you will, our expected output, so we can actually compare it to the output that we receive. Make sure that we continue to stay on the right track. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, actually, I'll ask again before I move on. Any more questions? All right, cool. So where do we go from here? So Jason and I sat down together last week for a few moments and discussed how we can actually incorporate his ACL, a test, an integration test for the ACL work that he's been working on. And Jason, do you want to show what you have? Oh, okay, well, cool. All right, so pretty much I'll just end it with saying how we proceeded is we just added another it clause. And if you will, I'm just going to show you a quick this is just a quick test. So pretty much you can just add another it clause if you want to use the same before and after each here. One thing to note, because we are not generating, what you can do is actually add a context to build the network inside the context, inside of before each there, so we don't have to build it over again. If you're going to just continue with what we have here, you would actually need to build this network again. So this test run here would actually build another network and go through everything else, and he can actually set up his chain code in here to actually point to something different if he so chooses. And then, as well as the config, there's an ACL config inside the profiles. You can add the profiles in there, update them to be whatever you want them to look like, and then perform queries on the system, chain code, or wherever whatever you're looking to do. I would let Jason talk about that in more detail, exactly how that test would look. But pretty much it's a matter of you configuring things however you need them to look and what you want to do or what you want to execute on that particular network. So we were successful in getting that done. Next we'll be working with Manish with IDB. So once this all gets merged, I'd say, have at it and see what you can do. So any questions, comments? So right now there's a group of 10 CRs for this change. Like I said, there's a couple more coming for Zookeeper and Kafka, and then a cleanup at the end of once this is taken care of. So,
Any other questions out there? Okay, and what channel, if there are questions that come up later, what channel in Rocket Chat do you propose we use to talk about this?
I guess since it's test related, we can go with quality.
Fabric quality, okay. So we can share updates on fabric quality as things progress, and then anybody can ask questions there as well. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
What are we going to do the Jira?
Oh, the Jira. Okay. So my part. I forgot my part.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
All right, so how do we track all this in Jira? So the idea is for every epic out there, we're going to have a test plan work item and as well a doc work item. So we've traditionally done at least a doc item. The test plan is a new thing. And what it will be is a item to really propel a dialogue between the different team members and system testers so that we can ensure there's coverage across unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end function tests like Leticia showed here, and SVT. So let me maybe share my screen and we can go take a look at one of these. Okay, so I'm going to the 1.2 release planning dashboard. And at the bottom of this, there are the two bottom widgets on the left are the end-to-end tests and SVT test tracking widgets. And in here will be in the end-to-end test widget, there'll be anything that has a tag of has a label of end-to-end test and a fixed version of 1.2. And in each of the main epics, we've already added a test plan work item. But let's take the finalized fabric access control mechanism one and take a look at that one. I know that this one has some more detail. So there's a test plan work item here, as well as for any individual test cases, we recommend creating additional top-level task items under the epic. And in the test plan, like I said, it's more of a place to have a dialogue and to get consensus around how we're going to cover test for this specific epic. So in this one, we can see we've got a unit test area, a integration test area, and a system SPT test area. And this is just some placeholder text at this point. But the idea is the Epic owner and the rest of the team would determine how they're going to test the feature and document that here and discuss with SPT. Did anybody else, I know, Scott, you have some thoughts on how this would be structured. Do you have any other things you want to share at this point?
You kind of covered it. I mean, what I filled in here what I think would be most useful and easy for everybody to kind of follow the same, make sure we're doing everything for each feature. The tests that we're going to do with UT that we've always kind of built on the UT framework isn't really going to change. And as we said, we're going to try to expand the coverage there. You might want to add some comments about that, things that you're going to do more like IT tests. So we kind of can convey some coverage. The end-to-end test cases that you were talking about creating, certainly within the integration test section here, those are supposed to be individual tasks, and so those will be, as you showed on the widget, and those are the ones that are using this new framework. There's going to be some testing that may or may not be able to use that framework as well, I guess, is potential. And the system test area is mostly a reference to there are going to be several system tests that are going to be running and including several different features. But if there's some concerns like, we want to make sure we're doing some restarts of the peers in this situation when we're running this type of chain code or something, then we need to point that out here. And since the whole test plan is going to be reviewed by somebody in the system test team, you're going to have obvious coordination then and they'll make sure that that's covered as part of their system testing as well. So it's kind of a holding it all together template that we'd like to see in all the different, every different feature epic where they can obviously identify what their UT is, their IT plan and test cases, and then the pointers to system tests. So that's, I guess, another way to say what you said, I think, but that's all I can share at this moment, I suppose.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott.
Right. So we'll ask each of the Epic owners to populate this test plan as such, I'd say over the next couple weeks, and have that dialogue with the system tester. So I think, Scott, you're going to help, finalize names for who will be the system tester for each of the epics here.
Sure. I can edit once we get this template in there. Try to do that. So the key is identifying the features and then making sure we have somebody lined up for all of that. At least have awareness for that. Yes.
Do you think it's worth talking about dates, given when we need stuff done by?
Well, the ideal situation was that we are done with development at the end of April, and we dedicate May to tests. And I would say, the first 2 weeks of May, be populating the test plans and test cases. As we know, some of the development items are still trying to close down this week, and so that would push us to next week probably to get to finalize these test plans. So I don't have the calendar in front of me, but I think end of next week would be a good target for the test plan and the test case population.
All right. So have JIRA populated with your plan and the individual, what you plan to test in the end to end.
Right.
Okay.
That was the last chart, right?
It wasn't. Yes, that was the last chart.
Wait, was this template in all the templates created, or did you do that already?
We can do that. We can copy the template into each of them.
Thanks for volunteering.
I was told to delegate.
Okay, any remaining questions? As I said, we can have the additional dialogue on fabric quality. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions as people get into it some more.
Well, I will take the action to post this recording into the playback matrix. I think that'd be a good place, and people want to go back and reference this.
Right, the playback wiki, right?
Playback wiki in that table we have there. Yep. Not a lot of questions.
So when we're creating the task too, we're going to apply this label. I think it's called an EDV test, right? For all the test cases.
Right, so just so everybody's clear, in each of the test work items, we're going to use this label E2E test, and this is what the report or that dashboard draws upon so that we can get good visibility onto the end-to-end test work items right here on this widget.
So just to make sure that I'm clear, this is when the test is ostensibly completed from a written perspective. We're not tracking testing, and are we? Because Jira is not really good at that.
Well, the idea is we use each of these tasks, the test tasks, to track the actual testing. So,
but the actual testing should be fully automated, so I don't understand that.
Once the test has been automated and merged, then we'd mark it as done.
Okay. That's what I wanted to understand. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. No, that's the plan.
Okay. Any other questions?
Everybody's on it.
Okay, we'll get through this together. I'm sure there'll be a lot of challenges and questions as we go, but I think this is a good overall direction. Okay, thanks everybody.
All right.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.